As you develop your playing, your ear, and your musicianship, you begin to hear things differently, perhaps more precisely. And I find the most important guitar technique really builds off this development of your musicianship. Without this technique being developed and refined, you can play as fast as you want, know every scale, know how to play in every genre, have great timing, play any song you want, but you will always sound bad, or at least amateur. But the good news is that this technique is super easy to develop and refine. What are we talking about today? We're talking about bends and vibrato. What I believe sets the guitar apart and above many other instruments, in my opinion, is that the guitar is a very vocal instrument. You can really express a wide variety of emotions and dynamics on the guitar. And at the heart of this is the guitarist's ability to bend and vibrato dynamically and expressively. Not all instruments have this ability. Now, before we dive into how we develop good bending and vibrato technique, we need to understand a few things. Bends and vibrato are not just a static mechanical technique. It's not like alternate picking or legato where you can just do pull-offs, hammer-ons, or you pick with a downstroke, upstroke, whatever. Bends and vibrato is dynamic, it's fluid, and the most important thing about it is it's emotional. The fundamental guide to good bends and vibrato is not the technique, but being able to capture the emotional story of the song you're playing. First thing to note is we don't bend with our fingers. We bend with the wrist. We don't push up and down with our fingers like this. We're locked in and we use the wrist movement, kind of as if we're opening a doorknob. We grab the knob and we turn it like that, and then we can release it back. Same thing with bends. We grab the note, it's locked in. Now, obviously there's a little bit of finger movement in there, but it's not our foundation of the technique. We are not doing that, where we're just moving the fingers up and down like this. We're not doing that. We're locking in. We got the note, and then we're turning the wrist like that. That is the proper technique. We're not hitting a note and then doing this. All right, that's the number one thing to note is it's not a finger movement, it's a wrist movement. If you would like to support me and this channel and also get access to tons of in-depth guitar lessons covering awesome technical licks like alternate picking, legato, or inspired by licks like Eric Johnson, Joe Bonamassa, or just music theory and things like that, go check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. All lessons come with tab, and I'm actually starting to do backing tracks with some of the lessons as well, so you can practice along with the real track. But if you're just interested in supporting me in my musical journey, Patreon is a great way to do that, and it's linked right down below. All right, thank you guys so much. Let's get back to the lesson. All right, the next point to always make sure you're doing when you're bending or vibratoing is to make sure to stack as many fingers as you can. For example, we're bending or vibratoing with the ring finger. I'm gonna stack all my index, middle, and onto my ring, right? I see some guys do this, and this is a very, very bad habit, and you need to go ahead and break it. We don't do this. Or we don't bend. That's not how we do it. We always stack the fingers. Never this. That's a very weak bend. It's very uncontrolled, and it's going to sound bad, non-musical, and bad. All right, now obviously the first finger we can't stack, and we'll still develop that with vibrato and bends. Usually the best way to bend with that finger, because we can't stack it, is to always pull down. That's usually the best way to do things. So we lock that in, and then watch the wrist down here. Right, we're pulling down. That's usually the best way because we can't stack that. Sometimes even with the middle finger, quite often, maybe even you can do the same thing is we're pulling down, but we're still stacking fingers right there. Pinky's the same way. We stack all of the fingers with the pinky. Right, we're not going. Right, that's just weak. It sounds bad. It's not confident. It's not controlled. So that's point number 2, to always make sure you're doing properly. All right, now that you have the fundamental technique down, you're not bending with the fingers, you're bending with the wrist. Let me add on to that point with the wrist. Make sure that there's a lot of space under the hand and the neck, okay? Because we need room to move our wrist up and down. Some of us will play super cramped, and our bends and vibrato have to be done with our fingers because we're so cramped. So develop a loose wrist and a lot of space developed under the hand here. And I'll show you guys that more in a moment. But number 3, super, super important. A lot of you guys already know this. Some of you don't. But bends are not random. You don't just grab a note, bend it a certain amount, and call it a day. When you bend, you're trying to hit a specific note. For example, for an A minor pentatonic, my guitar's tuned down a half step. But if I go to 8th fret B string, well, I'm going to do a whole step bend there. Not because I just randomly want to do a whole step bend. But I'm going from a G note and I'm bending to an A note. I'm bending to the note that you get the sound of on the 10th fret. Right? I'm not just doing a bend to do a bend when it ends up somewhere in the middle or somewhere random like... Right? We're not doing that. That's untargeted bends. That's unconscious. We're just, at that point, we're just accidentally almost moving the note. We're bending to specific notes. We need to be in control of that. We need to know exactly what note we are bending to. If I go to the high E on the 8th fret, and I'm doing a whole step bend, I'm not randomly doing a whole step bend. I know I'm in A minor, and I'm following the scale, and I want to hit C to D. And, you know, say I was on the 7th fret. B note. Well, then I'm going to do a half step in because I'm trying to target that C note. I'm not going to bend a C sharp on accident, like, right? Unless I'm choosing to do that, like in a Mixolydian context, maybe that works, but not right now. Right? If I'm on the B string 6th fret, whole step in because I'm following the scale shape. I'm not in between. I'm not over. Right? If I have 5th fret on the B string, I'm hitting a specific pitch. Every time you bend, you need to know exactly what pitch you're going for. Always, 100%. I don't care if it's a huge bend, like a minor third, like up here. I do that all the time. I love that. Right? That's a control bend. There we go, I did it there. Even though it's a big bend, I know what pitch I'm going to. I could do a whole step bend instead of... Here's a minor third. Here's a whole step. Here's a half step. Bends are always to a specific note, never random. Now, one last very, very important thing to know about bending before we get into how to practice bending is that we release bends, we don't pull them back. Kind of the doorknob analogy works with this too. If you turn the doorknob, it will naturally want to go back to its state where it was in the center. We don't move it back, we let it go back. Often, I'll see students who are, we're first getting over bends and vibrato, and they're not releasing bends, they're pulling it down. So they'll start here, say this is the pitch like normal, you bend up, and what happens most of the time when people pull down, they either pull short or they overdo it and it's like a bend. So that, obviously, if this is a flat pitch and I bend it up, well, if I go under that, it's still bending on the guitar. So what ends up happening, they do a bend, instead of releasing it back home, they go under and it gets this weird wobble sound, right? Or they go too short and it's sharp. So they bend up and it gets sharp. So we release bends back to where they started, and we'll fine-tune the control of that, because we are still controlling it, we're allowing it to release, but we're not moving it down, we're releasing it. For example, let's just go right here. So let's do a half step in, and I'm going back to the flat 12th fret B string. Right? This mechanic here is not, I'm not pulling it down. I'm holding there and then I release it. The string wants to go back home, and also I don't want to do this, where I'm pulling it. I'm trying to get it back to the position, but I overdo it. you get something like that. Or something like that maybe. Because I'm not releasing it. It wants to go back to the perfect spot. Just let it go back there. And it's a release, we're not pulling. All right, there's many great ways to practice bends, but the starter way, which is the best way in my opinion, is very, very simple, very important. Do this every day. Put this in your warm-up routine, put this in your practice routine, be conscious of it. This is an extraordinarily important mechanic to practice, and this is the best way to do it. Now, keeping in mind all the important points so far, which is bending from the wrist, stacking the fingers, letting the bends released, we're not pulling them down, and also, very, very important, bends are not random. They're always to a specific pitch. So what we're gonna do, we choose a scale, choose a key, doesn't matter what it is. I'm gonna choose A minor. Like I said, I'm a half step down, but that's kind of irrelevant. We need to know the scale shapes, or at least we have to choose what note. We actually don't need to know a scale shape. I think it's good to know the scale shapes and kind of outline that in our practice, but we don't have to. So we can just go random. Say I wanna practice a half step bend a couple different times on different fingers and on different strings, because different strings feel different parts of the guitar feel different. So let's do half step bend. Let's learn that. Is say we want to start 12th fret, okay, with ring finger on every string. Well, we're gonna do a half step bend, which means we're gonna be at the 12th fret, but we're gonna be bending to the pitch of the 13th fret. So what we're gonna do, pick the 13th fret, go back to 12, and bend it up until we match that pitch. Over and over again. Now we'll go to the B string, same concept. G string. D string. Also, I'll recommend pulling the D string down most of the time. So we bend downward. All right, now let's go to the 5th fret. So it's gonna be 5th fret, but we're gonna be bending to the pitch of the 6th fret, but let's use our middle finger. Stacking the first finger with it. I play the pitch I wanna hit, and then I go back 1 fret and I bend up to it until I hit that pitch. I like to bend the G string down right here sometimes. You can practice up or down. D string. Right, we might do the first finger. Let's go to the 15th fret. With the first finger, I start to pull down on the G string. I only push up on the high E and B. Let's do the pinky on 17. Right, so that's what we're gonna do. That's all half steps. We can do whole steps. 12th fret, go to 14. Right, and you might have to really search for that pitch. So sit there, like, so for example, say you're doing that, and you're not hitting that pitch. Or say maybe you go sharp. Sit at that note until you find that pitch. Right? Do this every day. Part of your warm-up, part of your practice. Just think of it spontaneously throughout the day. Just be aware of it. And then going forward, every time you bend, know exactly where you're bending to. All right, now let's talk about vibrato. Now, vibrato is really just a group of repeating bends in a very fluid manner, usually. Sometimes microtonal, which means in between the pitches you would find from fret to fret. When we're bending, we're always going to be trying to land on a pitch of a fret that we can play. Microtonal is going to be in between. So in between A and A sharp, there's these pitches. Vibrato might reach into that, and that's totally fine. And that's one of the cool things about vibrato is you can get in between. And very simply, how we're going to practice vibrato is just like we just did, but with a little bit more variation. And I find this vibrato practice not only makes your vibrato better, it makes your bends way better. So check this out. So same concept we just did, but we're gonna keep it fluid and smooth. Something like this, go high E, half step bend, 12th fret, 13th fret. Now we don't practice microtonally, so we're gonna start off with half steps. We're just gonna repeat it fluidly. Still trying to hit the pitch. Focusing on that release. This is where the release mechanic is super important. Vibrato sounds terrible always if you're not releasing. If you're pulling it down, it sounds terrible. And as you feel more comfortable, start off slow and then slowly build up the speed of the vibrato. I'm gonna do this down actually. Whole step. Right, so we're going to start off slow, precise, and then slowly, as we feel more confident and comfortable, we're going to build up the speed. This really, you have to make sure you're using the wrist and you're always releasing, not pulling down. And also make sure to try, half steps, whole steps, maybe minor third. Now in context, which we're about to get to, we might do microtonal. Before we dive into the most important thing about bends and vibrato, which is the expressiveness, let's talk about how to bend and vibrato together. Bending and vibrato together, to some it comes super natural and super easy. To others, it's a little bit more complicated. But the basic principle to start off with is, number one, we got to be really locked in, okay, with our bends especially. And also we need to understand when we add the vibrato, we want to be in control of when that happens, right? We don't want to just be, we hit a note in vibrato. We want to be in control, hit a note, and then I can slowly choose when to vibrato. That's very, very important. We're going to build on that in a moment. But with bends and vibrato, no matter what the bend is, we got to keep in mind vibrato is always on the guitar, unless you have a whammy bar to do vibrato with. It's we hit the pitch, and then we're vibratoing. We're bending the pitch higher, going back down to the pitch higher. That's the same equation here when we're doing bend. So say we start here, we bend to here, then we vibrato this bent note. It's going to be up, back down to the same pitch. We're not going to go lower, right? We can maybe do that, and it might sound okay sometimes, but the rule of thumb is here's the pitch we bent to. We're going to then overbend it slightly, going back, overbend, release back, and then once we're done, we can release all the way down. For example, if we go here. So we're 13th fret. Well, if I want to start vibratoing, I'm going to vibrato above that pitch. I'll put a distortion over it, get more sustain. Slow motion, I'm doing this almost microtonal vibrato. And I'm going from the pitch I bent to, up a little bit, back down. I'm not going below like this. Sounds weird. We don't want to do that. We go. right? And wrist, and then we're doing more wrist. So let me see if I can get a wrist angle here. So this is kind of okay. So we're bending the wrist, and then the vibrato's even more wrist. All right, now that's the technical side of bends and vibrato and how to practice it. For right now, very, very simple entryway into practicing bends and vibrato is making sure you have the right technique and making sure you're hitting the notes you're bending to precisely and controlled. Now, part of the expressiveness of bends and vibrato and how we can help use it to tailor the emotional story that we're trying to tell with our solo is, number one, it's built off the dynamics. So natural dynamics of how hard we pick, how light we pick, how the music is. Is it slow and is it kind of relaxed and laid back? That's going to make our bends and vibrato different than if it's upbeat, fast, aggressive. So we need to be in control of a couple things. Obviously, how hard we pick the note before bending or vibratoing, but when we start the bend and vibrato. For example, are we going to hit the note, hold it, and then bend? Being able to control that's very important. And then maybe have a vibrato after that. Right, see what I did there? It was all, I hit the note, didn't do anything. Slowly bent, got to my pitch, held it for a second, and then vibratoed the bend. Right, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I need a fast bend. Maybe I need to right into vibrato. Like very aggressive, like Angus Young vibrato. Or I need it fast bend into slow vibrato. Being in control of all these attributes is very, very important. How fast the bend is. Is it going from point A to B like super fast? Or obnoxiously slow like... All that changes the expression, the emotion that it can bring out. Now, we don't want to always vibrato every note. For example, if we're doing a melody, see, that's a very small microtonal vibrato, but I'm only doing it on the kind of last note of the phrase. And I'm delaying it. We don't want to be doing this. Right? At least uncontrolled. That might fit a certain song. It really might. I'm not saying that's terrible always, but most of the time that's not going to work, and we need to make it fit to the song before we can bring out the proper emotion. And that takes sometimes not vibratoing or waiting to vibrato. So I might do this. I hit the note, slid to it, held it for a while, didn't do anything, and then I did a very small microtonal vibrato. Right? Later in the solo, I might build it up. It might get aggressive. Right away vibrato. Let's do the same phrase here. Let's do the same phrase. Right? Very mellow. Now let's make it more aggressive. Speed it up a little bit. Same thing though, but I'm changing the vibrato. Right? The whole feel changes. So if I start off, same melody. Obviously, I'm changing the dynamic of my pick to help bring out that vibrato too. Right? Same notes, completely different emotional response because I'm changing the aggressiveness of my pick and the vibrato. The topic of controlling the expressiveness of the bend and the vibrato throughout different songs, throughout the same song, throughout the same solo is so, so important. we don't want to have the static same vibrato no matter the context, no matter the song, no matter the story of the song. Bends and vibrato needs to be perfected in such a way that we can open it up, not because we want to be obsessed about the technique. We want it down so we can express so much more emotionality and add it to our storytelling, all right? And being able to control when I vibrato, when I bend, how fast I bend. Do I vibrato that bend? How do I vibrato that bend? Is it a very microtonal relaxed? Is it a very fast microtonal bend or vibrato? Is it a very wide, Zach Wild, fast vibrato? Or is it very Steve Vai and it's circular and mellow, but still kind of wide? We want to be able to develop that, control that, because it helps us express and tell a story differently, just like a vocalist will. We don't want to be locked into same mechanics where we're bending randomly out of tune notes, our vibrato static, always the same no matter what. This technique right here is, like I said, very early on, as your musicianship develops, your bending and vibrato develops. And if you always have this static out of tune bending, no matter how fast you play scales or how much you know technically, you're going to sound bad and you're going to sound like an amateur. By developing your musicianship, this is going to help you polish every little nuanced thing with your playing. Fast licks only sound good if you end on very nice melodic phrases. If you're always playing fast licks and they're never ending beautifully, you're going to sound good, but you're going to still kind of sound amateur. You need to spend a lot of time every day practicing the bends and vibrato, perfecting them, the technique, with every finger, every possible way. So when you're going to do a slow blues solo, you have a certain bend and vibrato technique. When it's a fast metal song, you have a completely different bending and vibrato technique. If a song more, say it's super laid back, relaxed, you have a vibrato that fits that, tells to that story, adds to that story. And then if it builds up, you have another vibrato, right? You shouldn't have the same vibrato at the intense part of the song as you do at the mellow parts of the song, or at least if you do, it should be because you wanted it that way, not because you're limited by your technique. So in my opinion, and I think many other guitar players' opinions, bending and vibrato is the most important guitar technique, and it's completely not talked about. Everyone's talking about alternate picking, which is absolutely super fun, and you got to develop that as well. Legato, tapping, sweeping, all this crazy stuff, which is fantastic. But if you don't have good bends and vibrato and you're not able to control the emotional story of the bends and vibrato, you're not going to sound like a great guitar player. All right, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys back next time.